I feel like there's two really big groups of people that like the happy wife, happy life kind of lifestyle, you know? Like the picket fence, the dog, 2 kids, washing dishes, and you're, oh, hi, honey. Hey, honey, I'm home. All that stuff, right? I kind of see this as people that grew up in homes like that and that was modeled after them. And they're like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. And then there's also people that grew up in really chaotic households that are craving, desperate for some type of stability. That's what that lifestyle gives you, the happy wife lifestyle. You're at home waiting for your husband to get home. You're just cleaning things up. You have a daily routine. You guys aren't like out late at night chasing something that's gonna make you happy. You're not caught in addictive patterns. Everything is calm. You're laughing at the dinner table, not arguing. You know what to expect every day. And for somebody that grew up in a really messed up home, that type of stability is so calming. It feels so good. We dream about it. And Manling Williams, the woman we're going to talk about today, she did dream of that lifestyle. But what happens when somebody that is wired to live and survive in chaos is suddenly thrown in almost monotony? They try to enjoy it. They say, oh my God, I've done it. This is what I want. Kids, house, friends, everything's fine. But there's a resistance that you have to choose when you are a chaotic person that is now in a stable lifestyle. You have to resist being chaotic. You have to resist being self-destructive. You have to resist arguing. You have to resist losing it. You have to resist so many things. Even though somebody may want this type of lifestyle so desperately, doesn't mean that they can just slide right into it and be okay. They can't always do it. Bro, if you've been watching me for a minute, you probably know that I've talked about this case before. But also, if you've been watching me for a minute, you probably know I generally don't revisit cases, even if I have more information. This time, I deep dove into this one, and I feel like I learned so much more. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is because this thing is burned into my brain. Like, bro, you want to talk about cases that are burned into your brain? I don't know. Name one in the comments. We've talked about so many different cases that, like, I still shoot up late at night and I'm like, oh my God, did that really happen? But for most of you, as you know, what is this? It's Sinister. It's a show where we talk about female killers because I grew up watching a lot of Deadly Women and Snapped, and I've heard so many crazy cases that I have to tell you. It's like these stories are trapped inside of my body and I'm like, yo, did you hear this? So today we revisit one of the darkest and also, even though everything that happened seems pretty straightforward, I still feel so strangely about this case. But very recently, I actually saw some of the interrogation footage of the person that we're talking about today, Manling Williams. And her demeanor is so much different than I thought. She kind of reminds me of a Jodi Arias, the way she speaks and the way that she says things. But I don't know. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Now, her name today is Manling Williams, and it's shocking to me that she still has that name. But she was originally born Manling Seng. Her parents were immigrants from Taiwan, and they came to America, but they did not want Manling. She was an unwanted pregnancy. And this can happen. People can have a surprise pregnancy. They can not want to have the child. They can feel like their life is over. I totally get that. And maybe they push through and decide, okay, we're gonna have this kid. Well, guess what? You probably shouldn't let that kid know that you didn't want them. What's the use in that? Why bring a child into this world if you're just gonna take out all of your anger and frustrations about decisions that you made on them? They didn't ask for it. Anyways, Manling was very aware that her parents thought that she was stupid, that they didn't want her there, and that she was a burden to them. Manling's father, Kai, had absolutely no problem saying the nastiest stuff ever to her, and Manling's mother would often yell at her in public. She would yell at her so badly in public that other kids in school didn't want to be her friend. I mean, not only was it embarrassing for her, it was brutal. And then at one point, Manling wanted friends so badly that she stole money from her mother and then went back to school and tried to impress the other kids by buying things with the money. Well, Manling's mom found out and then came to the school and yelled at her again. Oh my God, the humiliation. I mean, truly. And don't get me wrong, this case is a nightmare. If you don't know how this ends, it is a literal nightmare. And we are not defending Manling by any means at all. But when we look at cases of, whether it's serial killers or mass murderers or whatever this is, our brain wants to know why, what happened. So I'm telling you why, and I'm telling you what happened, and I'm telling you what made Manling the person she is today. Humiliation does something very interesting to children. Embarrassment is something that we do to ourselves. Humiliation involves a power dynamic where somebody is then humiliating us. That always is the case in humiliation. And Manling's mom was not shy to humiliate her. A lot of times, this can breed vengeance in a child. This can make them upset with the person that's doing it. It can make them upset with humanity as a whole. Like, why didn't anyone stop this? Why did everyone just watch? And it just generates this anger because something bad happened to you, but nobody is listening to you. No one is helping you and no one is believing you. And this was what she dealt with all the time. So she kind of became a loner. She finished her schooling at Los Altos High School and graduated pretty much alone. Now, Neil, on the other hand, who would later become Manling's husband, he was just a chill kid. His parents actually divorced when he was younger, and then he went to live with his mom, Jan. Jan said that he kind of just did his things. He had a few friends that liked other nerdy things that he liked. He played the French horn in band, and he was just a chill kid. Like, everything was pretty okay. After high school, he went to college and worked at Subway on the side. And while he was working at Subway, he ends up meeting one of his coworkers' friends, and it's Manling. Neil was so enamored with her. He told his mom, Jan, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. I just want to talk to her. I want to kind of get to know her. And they ended up hanging out at a Rocky Horror Picture Show. And he just couldn't take his eyes off of her. Like, he almost couldn't even believe that Manling was giving him any attention. At this point, he was calling her Ling for short. Like, they were homies. It was cool. And he goes back home and he's like, oh my gosh, Mom, I love her so much. She's so beautiful. I could talk to her about anything. She likes the stuff that I like. She's like actually into it and knows what I'm talking about. And he's just, Neil, his heart is just beating out of his chest. And his mom has never even seen him like this before. And he's like, oh, Mom, I just like her so much. And we don't really have an account from someone on Manling's side of how Manling felt about him. But I guess she liked him because a couple months into the meeting, Ling was pregnant out of wedlock. This isn't like the very early 2000s, and they're just getting out of college, and Jan is like, what are we gonna do? I can't believe this. Like, okay, she seems like a nice girl, and Neil is happy. He's totally okay with it. And so they plan to keep the child. And unlike what happened to Manling before this, she plans to love and take care of her children. She doesn't want to treat them the way that Kai treated her. So on July 26th, 2000, Devin, their first child, was born. And, Manling, she was hanging around a lot because her parents kicked her out when she was having a baby out of wedlock. So she was kind of couch surfing, staying at a friend's house, and then also staying at Neil's mom's house, also while pregnant, and just tanking through it. And there was a little bit of tension in the family because at one point, Manling was like sitting in the car and they're driving somewhere. Neil's not here. And Jan, Neil's mom, is there. And it was after they had the baby. Manling says, I feel like if a man wants to marry a woman, then he should ask her dad first. And Jan was like, your dad hasn't been in the picture at all. I've been taking care of both of y'all this whole time. I've been supporting you while you're pregnant, and I'm supporting Devin now. Kai saying he's not in anybody's life right now. And Jan was like, Actually, maybe if you want to marry my son, then you should be asking me. And then Manling goes, okay, well, can I marry your son? And Jan's like, yeah, if you promise not to hurt him. That's exactly how their conversation went. She recounted it later. And I could tell that comment really, really haunts her, because she literally said, as long as you promise not to hurt him. A year after Devin was born, they got married on July 6th, 2001. Manling's family actually came to the wedding. They actually got married in a Taiwanese church, and it was a really big celebration. After they got married, they settled down in a condo that Manling's family owned. It was in Rowland Heights in California. And this wasn't going to be their forever home, but this was settling in. And everything was going pretty well, because in 2003, like 2 years later, September of 2003, that is when their second son, Ian, was born. Jan, who gave so much information into their lives and what the boys were like, she said Devin was the goofy one. He was very, very outgoing, but he was patient and not like all over the place and all crazy. And when he got older, he said that he wanted to study monkeys, which I think is the cutest thing ever. And then Ian, who was the younger son, he was a little more rambunctious, but mostly mischievous. He would kind of like follow his brother around and then just destroy anything that he made. So like if he was making something with Legos, Ian would come up behind him and just smash it and run off. But it was like it was all good-hearted. The family kind of just laughed about it. And that's what their personalities were like. And that's it. They have their home. They have their kids, they have each other, and this is the life that they're settling into. It's calm, it's relaxing, it's not quite the American dream that Manling wanted, but it's pretty stable. Every morning is wake up, make some coffee, take a shower, wake the kids up, make breakfast, put your makeup on, do your hair, pack lunch for the kids, get them to the bus stop, and then she's off to work at her restaurant. She waits tables, and then she comes home. And then the next day, she wakes up, she takes a shower, she makes some coffee, she wakes the kids up, she makes them lunch, and she's off to work. And then the next day, she wakes up, and she showers, and she makes coffee, and she packs lunch for the kids, and then she gets to work, and it's like this over and over and over and over again. There's no more going out at night. There's no more partying with her friends. Manling, she liked to go out with her friends a lot before. She can't now. She can't be hungover in the morning. The kids. She's got to be up for the kids. It's stable. It's nice. She wanted it, but this isn't quite what she's used to. And also, she didn't really want to rent a house from her parents, especially because they had a lot of bad blood. It felt like she was still eating out of their hand. And so here's the plan. Neil worked at Disneyland at the time. And Manling, she was working at a restaurant. It was the Marie Callender's restaurant. You probably see it in the frozen food aisle now all the time. But back in the 90s, early 2000s, these were pretty popular restaurants. Marie Callender, she makes pretty good fettuccine Alfredo. Or she did back in the day. Now it's frozen. Got a whole bunch of stuff in it. I don't even know. So Manling works at Marie Callender's. And Neil works at Disney. They're not making enough money. They also don't have career trajectories that imply that they will be making a whole bunch of money anytime soon. And she wants to get out of this condo that she's living in that her parents pay for. She hates it. And I get that. When you're in your late 20s, that's like, man, am I still here? Well, she wanted more. She just didn't know how to get it. So the other thing is, Neil's really not making that much money. I mean, maybe paying for a portion of the condo, maybe paying for some of the food, but also his mom was loaning the couple money like every month, all the time. Just, a little cash to get the kids, like an extra Happy Meal, a little money for rent, a little money to keep the lights on. Oh, Jan was jumping in and giving him money all the time. And also, they were basically living off of Manling's tips. Neil's paychecks kind of covered the basics, and then Manling's tip money was like their day-to-day, because she was coming home with cash in hand, every morning. And also, I know I talk about like, oh, if you guys were a server before, you know it. People that work morning shift, they really don't make crazy money. Now, I'll just say this for you guys who used to work in the service industry. Y'all all know that one person that was always on morning shift, they were always shift lead, they did their Monday through Friday shift, and like they knew how to make their money. You know what I mean? That's the person on morning shift that's making money. Everybody else, they're getting cut at like, they're coming in at 10 a.m., they're getting cut by 3 p.m., and they're only making money off of the dinner rush. Really, truly, I can't see Manling bringing home more than like $100 each day on the morning shift, if even that. But that's what they lived off of every single day. And this also grew a little bit of a resentment inside of Manling because, sure, Neil's mom was paying for a lot of stuff and Neil's paycheck was going towards the house, but Neil's money was just going back into her parents' pockets, and she was the one bringing home this cash every day. So she felt, even though they were both supporting the family, she felt like her money was going to Neil every day. But this resentment builds, but she doesn't act on it. She continues to do things trying to be a loyal wife, or, you know, what she thinks a loyal wife would be. And so she starts saving a bit of her tips every day. And then she comes out with a couple $100 and she has this big idea. Neil, you are going to be an insurance agent. That's what we're going to do, because she was a waitress. I mean, even if she climbed up to a bartender or a manager or something like that, she might make like 20% more, but it's not going to be groundbreaking. And she wants to own a home. She wants to have her family all put together and inside of a nice little house that she owns. She wants to feel secure, stable, and independent of her parents. I'm actually not sure why Manling didn't try to go find her own career path if she wanted to leave waitressing and have a bigger life. I mean, like, one theory is that if Neil was an insurance agent, he could work from home and take care of the boys in the daytime, and she wouldn't have to change her job. I really don't know. I have no idea. Maybe she felt like the guy should be making all the money, but she saves up and she decides to put Neil into this job path. She says, all right, babe, get out there and you go make some money. Get out there. This was her big ticket. This was her ticket out of her parents' condo. This was the way to having $5,000, $10,000 a month. Oh, they were getting out and they were moving on up. That was the plan. So Neil gets his insurance license and he is ready to sell. This job is fantastic because, like I said, he works from home. He can watch the boys in the daytime and do his calls throughout the day. But there is one problem. To be a salesperson, you have to have a certain personality type. Now, I'm not dogging on salespeople, but you salespeople, you know that this job isn't cut out for everyone, especially if you work somewhere where you're constantly doing sales. You've seen people cycle in and out of that job, huh? Neil didn't have a special ability to do sales. He couldn't push a product onto somebody if they were hesitant about it. He was the type of person where if somebody says, I don't think I need that, he would say, okay, well, I totally get that. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. He wasn't a great salesperson. He worked this job for a while, and the other big problem with it was he was paid on a commission basis. If Neil didn't make any sales, Neil didn't make any money. So a couple weeks into this new venture, they have even less money than they had before. Their money is running out. They had very little savings to begin with. They were living paycheck to paycheck. Damn, they weren't even living paycheck to paycheck. They were living day to day off of Manling's tips that probably didn't even reach $100. Things were going the opposite of as planned. And, you know, not only did Neil not have the special salesman ability, he didn't want to do sales. Remember I told you earlier, this kid was just chilling in the playpen quoting Monty Python. You know what Neil liked to do? He liked to play video games. He was always gaming, to the point that it was annoying Manling. She felt like the house was in shambles. She felt like all he wanted to do was sit on his games. He would play a lot of old school first person shooters. He would just be chilling, playing video games, doing his thing. He loved gaming. He loved his computer. He had a sword collection. He was collecting samurai swords. He did like his other job before at Disneyland. It was good. It was nice. The salesman job, he really doesn't want to do it. But Manling has already put money into it, and he has the job. He just needs to make a couple sales to make some money. It's just hard. It's really hard for him. So, every day he's kind of just jumping in, making a couple calls, feeling a little beat down, and then he just wants to get on his computer and play some video games to just relax, calm down. And Manling comes home every day, 4 or 5 o'clock, annoyed, feeling like she's sharing a portion of her money with her husband that's just playing video games all day when, Neil's actually really trying. And on top of that, he's a great dad. He's a great dad. When he got the opportunity to work from home, the excitement of being able to spend so much time with Ian and Devin was just overwhelming. He was always with the kids. Jan didn't have to come over and take care of them all the time. He wasn't just trying to slack off, play video games. He was enjoying connecting with his sons about these nerdy things, these samurai swords, shows, Star Wars, gaming, all of that. He had 2 boys. These were his boys. And then 5 o'clock, Mom comes home. As the weeks and eventually months drag on, about 3 months into the job, Manling is bored, she's irritated, and she's just over it. She was just very unimpressed by Neil at this point, which really bothers me because Neil is one of those people where he shows you exactly who he is. He likes these things. He's pretty laid back. He just wants to enjoy his daily routine and take care of his sons and be happy. He was like a golden retriever. Manling knew exactly what type of person he was before she got into this relationship, before she got into this marriage. And now suddenly she wants to act like she's bored. But she asks Neil for a divorce. She says, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's just end it. Let's get out of here. And Neil's like, hey, I really don't want to do that because my parents divorced when I was a kid and I feel like I turned out okay, but I had a really hard time not having my dad in my life all the time. I had a really hard time with my parents' divorce. I can't do that to our children. And he said, Manling, I will do anything to make this relationship work and to make you happy, because to make you happy is to make our kids happy. And that's what type of person Neil was. So after she asked for the divorce, he did not take this lightly. The next day he got up and Neil went to make some calls and he was going to make some sales. It takes a while for Neil to build up this kind of sales muscle, to really start making these sales. But he's determined to make money for his family. But it's hard. Even if you're very determined to get to a certain goal, if you don't know how to get there, and in this case, you don't know how to make the sales, it gets really depressing. And so Neil is trying and he's clawing, but he is sinking deeper and deeper into this depression. And as he sinks deeper into this depression, he goes to the one thing that makes him happy. That's playing video games. In the daytime, he hangs out with the boys and he's just itching for at night when they go to bed or when Manling can take care of them and he can just get a couple hours like playing a few games. Like, it's fun. It's relaxing. It's the only joy that he has in this world right now because, his wife is acting like she hates him every day. And as he kind of slips deeper into this depression and just this like hole of playing video games all the time, Manling also kind of slips into her own depression and she tries to get out of the house more. She still is friends with all of her, friends that she made in her mid-20s or so, and they like to go out. So she starts going out even more. But things get a little strange because Neil feels like something is going on. He feels like Manling isn't just hanging out with her girlfriends. He feels like there is somebody else in the picture. He just feels it. She's acting different. She doesn't want anything to do with him. There's almost like a level of disgust. And Neil feels like something's wrong. But when he tries to talk to her about it, she shuts him down so hard. She makes him feel like he's not a man in the relationship. She makes him feel like this is all his fault, that he's not making X amount of money. She makes him feel like he's not taking care of his family. And with that, Neil feels like he can't voice his feelings. He feels shut down. He feels like a failure. And anytime he tries to ask Manling questions, she shuts him down so hard. What does he do? He's gonna go play video games. He's gonna go hang out with his son. So he's gonna try to make more money. He's gonna try to fix it. But he's so lost and he's so confused. And things kind of turn up a little bit for Manling because at one point she asked Jan if she could help watch the kids for a little bit because she was getting a promotion at work. Her job was gonna send her off to go get some training so she could be a manager at Marie Callender's. So Jan's like, yes, of course, absolutely. Manling's like, look, if you're not gonna make the money, Neil, I'm gonna get out there, I'm gonna put the big pants on, and I'm gonna do this. But here's the thing, Manling wasn't actually going to get any training for her new job. She had actually linked up with an old fling on Facebook, but this wasn't like an actual old fling. This was a guy that she had a crush on in high school. Remember I told you how Manling was brought up? Her mom is just constantly humiliating her in public and at school. So when she gets older in high school, she just is kind of shy and she doesn't want anything to do with many people because she doesn't know what people think of her. So she kind of like sees herself as kind of like a loser, like darting through, school. But there was a guy that she had a really big crush on. Let's just call this guy Frederick. Frederick and Manling start talking on Facebook. And with everything going so poorly in Manling's marriage at the time, and because I told you she is a child of chaos, she's like, well, let's go see what's over here. This is fun. This is exciting. This is what people that were born in chaotic environments look for. They look for things that feel good, regardless of whether they are good for you or not. Because Manling talking to an old high school crush on Facebook when she's got a husband that is struggling so badly in his career, in his finances, in his depression, just trying to take care of the kids, and she got 2 sons. Manling, newsflash, that is objectively bad, but she keeps going because it feels good. It's exciting. It's like she's giving this to this younger high school version of herself of like, wait, look, oh my God, our crush likes us now. He likes us now. He's interested in us. She never would have been able to talk to this guy before. And so just everything feels so good to her. She's so stoked. She can't stop. And so she's talking to this guy all the time, and it's a secret. And I think that's what makes it even more exciting for her. This little affair, this little way out of her stressful, boring marriage to her with this guy that she's always had her eye on. So this is where that lie comes in about her going to get managerial training. No, she was going off to go see Frederick. If you guys have ever had online friends before, there's this interesting thing that happens where you're friends with somebody for like weeks, months, whatever, and you guys talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and the excitement of seeing that person in person is like so overwhelming. And this is how things go for Manling and Frederick. It's exciting. It's invigorating. It's just everything's in full technicolor. Like, for Manling, it's like my secret that has made me so happy. The one thing that has brought me joy over these past couple of weeks and months, it's right here. And he's like, ooh, this is like this, I don't know, hot chick from high school that was kind of nerdy. And I'm talking to her now. Oh, they are just, everything is like stars. Mostly for Manling. I think this goes a little bit deeper for her. But they have a great time. She's there for about 2 days, hanging out, doing a lot of PDA. They're going out to dinners. This guy has his own apartment, no kids, and a good job. That's what Manling wants. She wants to start over. He has the perfect do-over sheet that she wants, and she feels like she could just jump right into. I don't know if he just didn't want Manling in the long-term type of way, or if he really meant this, but he ended up telling her towards the end of the trip, hey, I've had a really, really good time, and I think you're amazing, and this was so fun, and I'm so happy we got to reconnect. And she's probably feeling this anxiety because she knows the butt is coming, and he's like, I want to keep talking to you. And she's like, oh my God, what is he going to say? And it's funny because we all know what he's going to say. She knows what he's going to say, but she's like, please, God, don't say it. And then he says it, but I don't want anything serious right now, and I don't want to get in between somebody's marriage, especially when they have kids. And it's like everything just stops. The adrenaline stops. The excitement stops. That's like the reality check. You know, when you're doing something really, really bad, but it's just all driven by adrenaline, and you don't care about the consequences. You don't care that you're self-destructing. But then the reality check comes in. And sometimes you get so angry at the reality check. And I think part of that could be because we're so angry at ourselves for letting it get this far. We're so angry that we let ourselves get emotionally invested in this way. But when he drops this reality check on her, everything is shattered. What has she done? How far has this gone? And now, how does she get out of it? And not just how does she get out of this affair? Because he's done. She could just walk right away. Emotionally, how does she forget that this happened? How does she forget how good this felt? So she leaves. She goes back to Neil. She goes back home with nothing but feelings of what could have been, of feeling like a failure, feeling like she's not good enough, feeling anger at Neil that this was her life, feeling so many emotions, some rational and some irrational, just everything flooding at once. And sometimes when that happens, what we get is just silence. Now, obviously, I'm just assuming here, but I can just only imagine Manling driving back on that long drive home in complete silence, even though her thoughts were so loud. You know, something I haven't experienced before, but I am so curious about is when somebody is in a secret relationship, an affair in their marriage, and that affair ends, like let's say they get broken up with, the feelings of a breakup are so heavy, so otherworldly. But now imagine this person has to come back to their spouse and they're so sad and they can't keep it together. They're feeling heartbreak, but their spouse doesn't know that they were cheating the whole time. God, I bet that happens all the time in America. I mean, this is exactly what happened in this case, but you know, me being nosy, I'm like, what does that look like in the home? I actually have no idea. Sometimes I kind of infer, like, this is what I think. Like, I really think Manling was dead silent in that car the whole time. I really do. But I have no idea what it was like in the home when she got back the next couple of days. But what I do know is that a couple weeks later, Manling tried to pick herself up and went out with friends for drinks at a TGI Fridays. They called her at about 10 o'clock and it was late, but you know, Neil was playing video games. The boys were asleep and she said, yeah, I'll come out. So she does her hair, she does her makeup real quick, and she heads out. And supposedly she's at the bar by about 11 o'clock. She hangs out with them, chats a lot, has a few drinks. They're kind of doing their thing. And she leaves at around 12:30. Manling says she came home that night, saw the boys were in bed, kissed her on the forehead, and kind of rolled over and pulled the blanket over their head. And then she checks on Neil, and Neil is just passed out on the couch. And then she decides to go upstairs. And then she said around 1 a.m. or so, Neil joined her in bed. And then she says that she woke up around 4:30 in the morning. She couldn't sleep. She'd been dealing with insomnia for a couple years now, actually. It wasn't a weird night if Manling wasn't sleeping. It was a weird night if she was getting some sleep. So she had a little bit of a routine. She would go out and smoke a cigarette up on this ridge that's kind of like above their house. You had to drive up to it, but she had been doing this for a while and she liked to watch the sunrise. So around 4:30 in the morning, she just can't fall asleep. So she said, and she woke up and she hopped in her car and she drove up to the ridge and she sat there. She smoked a couple cigarettes and waited until the sun came up at about 6 in the morning. And then she said she walked inside the home and there was this kind of like air of stillness. And it was very strange because the boys would have woken up at some point and that would have woken Neil up. And she said it was so quiet. So she walks in and she starts walking up the stairs and she's saying, Neil, Ian, saying their names, and she's not hearing anything back. She got upstairs and she saw blood everywhere. And as she's describing this in the interrogation, she holds out her hands and she says there was blood. There was so much blood. And when she holds out her hand, the investigator takes her hand and he says, "And how did you get this wound?" And Manling said, "Well, I ran upstairs and I saw the blood and I got scared and I slipped and I put my hand flat in a pool of blood," which doesn't explain how she got the wound. But that was her explanation for this strange wound that was on her hand. Manling was not wrong. There was a lot of blood. There was blood everywhere. I don't feel it's necessary to include crime scene photos when I talk about these stories, but when I dive really deep into them, I see a lot of this stuff. And the crime scene was horrifying. I don't think I've ever seen that much blood in photos before. She was right. There was a pool of blood. The carpets were drenched in blood. There were smears of blood across the wall. There were splatters everywhere, and it was from the bedroom to the hallway to another bathroom. It was all throughout the entire house. And what's crazy to me is Manling sat in this interview and she hyperventilated and she said, "I just want Neil to pull through. I just want him to pull through. He needs to pull through for me. He needs to pull through for me and the kids." Anybody that saw the amount of blood upstairs would be questioning if their children and their husband were alive. They wouldn't be saying, "Oh, they need to pull through. They need to pull through for this, and this." The blood was insane. You would be asking what happened in there. Her response was so strange. And then in the interrogation, Manling did it. She did the thing that I always talk about. If you've watched my streams before where we watch like 48 hours, we watch one of those like crime shows, I always notice in interrogations that the killer will start throwing the victim under the bus in the interrogation. I am telling you, this happens so often. They'll say, "Oh my gosh, Tony's dead. Well, he was involved with this drug cartel." Or, "Oh my God, Monica's dead. Well, she was having an affair with so-and-so." They always will say something to throw the victim under the bus, because generally when most people find out that somebody has died, they give a second to mourn that person and let them exist as a full human being. And they don't just go straight to whatever bad things are going on. But usually the killer will bring this up because they're trying to mislead officers. So Manling did it. And as soon as the officers tell her, "Nobody's going to be pulling through. Your children and your husband are dead." Oh my God. She gives the silliest response. She goes, "No." And I am not kidding. Within moments, she immediately starts throwing Neil under the bus by, guess what? Projecting. She says, "Well, just the night before all of this happened, he had just confessed to me that he was having an affair." And they're like, wait, he was having an affair?" She's like, "Yes, he was having an affair. He was having an affair. And then he died the next day." She's like, "Yeah." And like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so they start asking around. They start asking friends and family, "Was Neil having an affair?" They were like, Neil wouldn't even know where to start with having an affair. And then they start asking, "Okay, well, do you think that she might have been having an affair?" Guess who knew that she might be having an affair? Neil's mom, because Neil couldn't talk to her about anything. So he had to lean on his mom, who he was very close to. And so when the police talk to Jan is like, she doesn't think that Ling did it, but she thinks okay, well, Neil did feel like she was having an affair. Did the guy that she was dating do this? And so she tells police, yeah, she was having an affair. I'm pretty sure she was. And so they say, "Okay, well, let's go check it out." So they go to the house and they're checking her suitcase. They're checking, her nightstand. They're checking everything. And then, of course, even though this is very new, they check the computer. And you're not going to believe what they found. What they find is a note. And so investigators are like, "What is this?" Well, see, this was odd. It was odd that Neil would write a note, because Neil had been slashed to death with one of his own samurai swords over 90 times. Whoever did this had slashed and stabbed and sliced his body so much that he was pretty much unrecognizable. From the massive cuts, this wasn't a knife. This was a samurai sword where someone is stabbing and moving and cutting and swinging. This was a frenzied attack, and he was stabbed over 92 times. Neil had defensive wounds on his hands because his fingers had been sliced off. His hands had been completely butchered. So it doesn't make sense that Neil would type out a suicide note and then somehow slice himself up with his own samurai swords in his own home. It doesn't make any sense. In fact, it's absolutely ridiculous. Manling has to be involved. The good news is they already have custody of her. So they take her back into the interrogation room. I think it was at about 11 o'clock at night. And they came back with the information about the note. They asked her some questions about it. She still kind of acted like she wasn't involved. She said, I didn't do this. I wasn't involved. I just want people to know I wasn't involved. And then they pushed her on her relationship with Frederick. She kind of tried to act like it wasn't a thing. And initially, when they interviewed Frederick, he said that he wasn't in any kind of affair with her. But later, they pushed him and he confessed. So they told Manling, well, he said that y'all had a thing going. And she said, okay, I guess that's true. But I still didn't do this. And they said, okay, but also we found your pack of cigarettes at the crime scene with Neil's blood on it. And she didn't know how to respond to that. She kind of froze and started to get really upset. And they said, why are you upset? What's going on? She said, I'm not sure if I should call a lawyer or if I should just tell you guys everything. And detectives, they did their thing. They started leaning in, rub her on her side, and they said, come on, tell us what you know. They kind of had to coax the information out of her. In the interrogation, you can see them asking her pretty clear-cut questions, and then if she stumbles, they give her a clear choice between like one or two answers just to keep her moving. And Manling proceeds to give her full confession and exactly what happened that night. That night, Manling Williams put on a pair of gloves. After her two sons had fallen asleep, she went into the room, took a pillow, and then held it over her 3-year-old child's nose and mouth until he lost consciousness, and then she continued to hold the pillow over his face until he died. Then she climbed the bunk bed where her oldest child, Devin, was sleeping. He slept while his mother killed his little brother, and then she did the same to him. After she killed her sons, she pulled the sheet just up to under their chins and moved their arms to make it look like they were still kind of asleep. Manling's original plan was to kill both of her children and then have Neil find them and be so stricken with grief that he would decide that he was a bad father and then take his own life and leave the note. That was the initial plan. But after Manling killed her two children, it was like something happened. It was like she was ready to just leave everything behind. So she then went and chose the largest and sharpest samurai sword in the entire house. And while Neil was asleep, he was face up, asleep at the ceiling, she took the sword out and she stood over him. And she had a moment to really think about what she was going to do. I mean, she had already gone too far. She had killed her two children. Her two sleeping boys. She had murdered them. But the act of violence that she was about to commit was unfathomable. She held the sword over his body and she struck him. She slashed him over the chest with the large samurai sword. And Neil immediately shot up out of the bed. And then she struck him again and again and again. And he tried to crawl away from her. But not only did she chase him down in their home with that sword, but even as he tried to fight her off, she sliced his fingers off, she sliced his face, his neck, his body. She let out every pent-up emotion that she had on him with this sword. And after 92 stab wounds, Neil's last words to Manling or help me. The deputy medical examiner testified in this case. He said that Neil Williams lost the tips of 2 fingers on his right hand and broke several fingers while defending himself. He had 22 wounds on his hands. He suffered a fatal wound when he was stabbed through the heart with a large sword, damaging his right ventricle and his aorta. His lungs were both punctured and filled with blood. He suffered multiple slash wounds from the back through his neck and thyroid gland. He suffered a damaging stab wound through his small intestine. There was a chop wound on the back of his neck where the sword strike was able to fracture the skull and cause bleeding in the brain. The other wounds were classified as incisive. Those are wounds that are cuts across the skin that are longer than the depth of the wound. Those are when she kept slashing him with the sword. This attack went on for a while, and he survived most of the slashings until the last fatal wound where she stabbed him through the heart with the sword. After this wound, Neil would die in about 10 minutes after he'd been brutalized by his own wife. That night, the toxicology report also showed that he had 0.02% of alcohol in his system. It's not even enough that they would classify it as positive. So it seemed like that night, Neil played his video games and had 1 beer and went to bed. This confession expedited the court case, and the prosecutor and Manling's defense attorney did not hold back. The defense did a pretty interesting job of painting how she grew up, which was why I was able to describe that to you guys earlier. And the prosecutor just really went in on how disturbing this crime was. Not only did Manling brutally murder Neil Williams, a man that she was supposed to love, cherish, and be with for the rest of her life, but she also murdered her 2 children, all because she decided she didn't want this life anymore. The jury had no problem convicting her in the murder of Neil and their 2 sons. But they did deadlock on the death penalty. She was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder as well as lying in wait. Manling's father actually pleaded for her life before the sentencing came out. He showed up in the courtroom and he said, "When talking about this, I feel I owe too much to the Neil family. I feel really sorry. Please forgive me. As a father, I didn't do good. That is why this happened. And I'm sorry." After the jury deadlocked, they had to do a retrial. And this time, January 12th, 2012, the jury found Manling Williams guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to death on January 19th, 2012. And to this day, she still remains on death row.